Hi everyone, great to see you again. I hope you're all well. Today I am out in the woods to try and squeeze the last drops of autumn goodness out of the peak colours that we're getting at the moment. There's still a few pockets of those beautiful leaves up in the trees above me. I think probably the best colours are probably gone now, but there's no point moaning about that. I still think there's an awful lot of potential in this area. Now, I'll be honest right from the start. I am lousy at woodland photography, and that's simply due to the fact that I don't have much experience in that area. I tend to shy away from it simply because it's really hard. It is hard to try and make order and simplicity out of all of this chaos that you're often surrounded by in woodland environments is really tough, and it requires a strong eye and a really good sense of creating compositions, and it's challenging, it really is. So today I'm going to start the first step on the journey to try and put that right, because it's really a niche within landscape photography that I'm really eager to explore more and get better at. So yeah, that's why I'm here today, and I think this woodland offers me a great opportunity to try and find some compositions. I'll be honest, at the moment I'm feeling a little bit daunted. There seems to be a lot of potential around me, but at the same time I'm really struggling to train my eye on exactly what I want to capture. So I'm going to put the camera down for a bit. I'm just going to have a little stroll around these woods, and fingers crossed something jumps out. I am struggling big style here, and I think the main reason is, well, one, my inexperience of woodland photography, but also the lighting is quite challenging too. So it's actually a perfectly blue sky day today, which I wouldn't usually choose for woodland photography, but actually I think it's got great potential, but it's quite difficult to harness. So you can see the sun here piercing through the trees. Sun doesn't get very high in the sky this time of year, so it's kind of skirting along the top of the forest at the moment, sort of piercing sunlight down through the actual trees here. But the problem I've got is it's moving quite fast, so it offers great potential to highlight elements such as, you can see the tree behind me just here. There's a wall just there that it's highlighting occasionally. So when the light highlights parts of the forest and the canopy and the forest floor, it offers great potential in terms of compositions. However, the light moves so quickly that by the time that you see something and you get your camera out, you get your tripod out, etc., the light has already moved and the potential is gone. Now you can sit around and wait for hopefully another break in light to highlight that area, but there's no guarantee. The light seems to be quite random in the way it's distributed here, because the trees are quite thick back in that part of the forest there, so that is making it quite challenging. I'm seeing ideas, but they're just very fleeting, and then they seem to disappear before my eyes. So yeah, no progress made so far, but it's early days yet. I think I found my first composition. Now, I really struggle with woodland photography, but this one just jumped out to me, and what really caught my eye was the light that's falling just on the scene you can see behind me here. So we've got a dry stone wall that kind of runs up through the scene, and then you've kind of got this weird bendy tree that's covered in a thick lush green layer of moss that just kind of bends over the top of the wall. It's really quite eye-catching, and it really stands out in this particular area, and you can see the light kind of streaming in from this direction behind me here. It's kind of streaming in and illuminating the wall and the bend in that tree right at this moment in time, and then a lot of the background here is not illuminated, so it really makes this area of the scene pop out. But then you've also got little bits of light that are catching this little birch tree behind, which has got beautiful yellow and orange foliage up there. So that's making bits of that pop in the scene as well. So what I'm doing here for the composition, you can see my camera set up just here, is quite simply I'm placing the wall and the tree there in the right of my composition, and then out in the left of the composition I'm placing this beautiful golden tree in the backdrop there. I think it works quite nice, and quite simply it's light that's making this. Without that light, I don't feel the composition would work at all. This foreground here would get lost amongst the chaos and the busyness behind it. But the fact that the light is coming through and selectively highlighting parts of the image just makes sense of that chaos that little bit more, and for me it really, really works. In terms of settings here, I am shooting this at f5, focusing in for the tree here. So all of this area should be nice and sharp, but then anything behind the tree and the wall here should drop off and become nice and soft and sort of painterly in feel. And I think that will work quite nicely, because I think one mistake you can make with woodland, I'm certainly no expert, is that if you try and maximize your depth of field with a narrow aperture, I think your compositions can feel a little bit too busy. Whereas if you just make that depth of field drop off in the backdrop, it helps to just make sense of the scene, and it helps focus the eye of the viewer on exactly the part of the composition that you want them to look at. So my gut tells me it's the right approach here. So f5, I'm currently about 13th of a second, ISO 100, currently at about 35mm, and I've also got the circular polarizer on the front just to punch out the colours a little bit more. So yeah, it looks pretty promising so far, so I'm just going to stay here a little bit longer and see if I can get the lighting on the different parts of the scene just right. After stopping for a brief spot of lunch, I stumbled across this old and beautiful gnarly beech tree that really caught my eye. So I set about trying to capture it from various different angles, but I couldn't really get anything to work, and I wasn't particularly satisfied with any of the images that I was capturing. However, when I took the images home into post-processing, this particular image really stood out to me, and I think it just goes to show that it's not always a good idea to dismiss images out of hand out in the field, because it can be very difficult to judge them on small LCD screens, and sometimes when you take an image back onto a bigger screen and spend a bit more time with it, that's when the true potential becomes apparent. So what I really like about this is actually the backdrop of lighting, and that's precisely the thing that put me off initially. When I was shooting this, the heavy backlighting in this scene was creating a high degree of contrast, which made it very difficult to judge the quality of the shot on the LCD. But that same backlighting is creating kind of an ethereal look to this shot, and it helps to create a degree of separation between the limbs of the beech tree and the straight pine trees you can see in the backdrop there. It also helps to punch out the colours of the remaining beech tree leaves there. And I think it also goes to show that blown out highlights aren't always necessarily a bad thing. The highlights are very blown out in this shot, but it helps to create that degree of separation again, and it helps to instill a feeling of warmth which resonates through this shot. Indeed, when I tried to blend in an underexposure bracket of this shot to try and draw in those highlights, the shot just looked naff and it didn't work. at all. So in terms of settings for this, I shot this image at ISO 100, about 30mm, a quarter of a second, but most importantly I shot it at f4.5 to give me a very shallow depth of field and add some bokeh to the backdrop there to help make sure that those pines are out of focus and not distracting. So I simply focused in for the main trunk of the actual beech tree. In terms of post-processing, I felt that split toning and negative clarity and dehaze really came into their own when post-processing this image. So I think overall with this image, I think it just goes to show that you should trust your gut instinct, and quite often in the field, if you're shooting something and you're desperately trying to make it work, it means there's potential there and you shouldn't ignore it. I found another composition and I'm quietly confident about this one. Now what's caught my eye here is this beautiful clump of moss that you can see here, and the more you look at it and the more you study it, you just realise that there's absolutely stunning structures in this moss. It's really, really beautiful, and the way that it's growing here, it's just captured all of these autumnal leaves. So we're getting kind of reds, oranges and yellows contrasting beautifully with the vibrant green of that moss. So for me, that just screams foreground, and that should make an absolutely beautiful foreground, I think. But there's a lot more going on in this scene, and that's why this shot really, I think, hangs together. Well, at least in my head it does. Behind here you can see we've got another fern, which is really pretty there, and that's a different shade of green to the actual vibrant green of the moss, so there's a bit of contrast there. And then behind that you've got, I think it's a beech tree here that just bends over the composition there, and then at the top of the beech tree you've got the beautiful orange and yellow shades of its foliage there, and I just think the dark branches contrast beautifully and punch out against the colours in the actual leaves there. And I think all together the combination of the moss, the fern and the tree work quite nicely together. Now what I'm trying to do here is to avoid any bits of sky creeping into my image. Now you're going to have tiny little bits coming through the woods there, but what I mean is I don't want anything sort of out here, because that's just going to distract from the main stars of the show, which are right here. And I think there's a lot of promise in this shot. It's quite a tricky one to pull off though. You can see that I'm super low to the ground. I'm pretty much lying on the ground here, and that is so I can get super low and shoot across the actual moss and the leaves and capture the tree and the fern behind. It's all about angles. If I was too high, I wouldn't be able to get all three of them within a coherent composition. Now this one is 100% a focus stacker. Now what I've done is I've taken a 4-image focus stack. The first image is focused down on the foreground leaves here. The second one is focused into the back of the moss. The third shot is focused in for the start of the ferns, and the fourth shot is back on the tree, and that should give me nice sharpness throughout this scene. This is a scene which I think demands sharpness from front to back because it doesn't feel that chaotic to me. So I'm not going for the same painterly effect that I've gone for on some of the other shots that I've taken today. With this, I want the viewer to be able to see from front to back because I think there's interest throughout the scene. I've also got the circular polarizer on the front just to punch out these colours, and yeah, that's about it. I'm shooting at about 24mm, ISO 250, and yeah, that's about it. So it's a nice shot, I think, and we've pretty much lost the light now, so I don't think I'm going to be doing any more shooting. So for me, it's quite a nice finish to a beautiful day in the woods. One other quick thing that I forgot to mention is with regards to the polarizer. So the polarizer is fully engaged at the moment. Keep your eyes trained on the ferns in the middle of the image. So the polarizer is now off. See how they've got a sheen on them? And then the polarizer is fully engaged again. Now the problem I find is when the polarizer is fully engaged, I think the ferns are missing a bit of that sheen, because the sheen adds definition and contrast into that part of the image. However, with the full amount of sheen, I think that's distracting as well. Your eyes go straight into the highlights on those actual ferns. So for me, what I'm doing on the images that contain those ferns, I'm just dialing in a little bit of polarization, but not the full amount, and that allows some of the sheen to be retained in that part of the image, but it doesn't make it too distracting, so it's a happy medium between both of those positions. So that's it for today. I think it's been a fairly productive shoot all in all, and I'm pretty happy with the images that I managed to capture, considering this really isn't my area of specialty. But it's absolutely beautiful just spending time out in the woods, and even if you don't manage to actually secure any images, it's just really therapeutic, I find, and I can't help but feel really relaxed and content whenever I come out into environments like this. And for me, that's one of the main benefits of doing landscape shooting, full stop. So I hope you've enjoyed today's little video and picked up some useful insights and tips on how to approach woodlands. I think polarizers are really important, and I think it's important to remember that you need to remember when to use polarizers and when not to use polarizers, and the fact that particularly circular polarizers, you can dial in the polarization. So as you saw on that final shot there with the ferns, just small little tweaks like that can really make or break a shot in these kind of environments, I find. But yeah, so that's about it for today. If you've got any thoughts on woodland photography or the 3 images that I managed to secure, pop them down below. I'm always really happy to hear your thoughts and your general photography insights. And if you haven't yet subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that button below for more videos just like this, and I'll see you all soon. I think I'll be doing a lot more of this type of photography in the weeks and months ahead. Take care.